Welcome to the Conquer Food podcast with Craig and Paula Williams, where we share tips, tricks and strategies from the coalface of the weight loss industry in the UK. We're going to help you to think, eat and move better. Ultimately, we're going to help you finally gain control and conquer food. Hey up food fighters, welcome to the Conquer Food podcast. In this episode I was posed the question, what would be your 5 top tips for getting back on the wagon, okay? So just getting going again when things have fallen a little bit flat, you've fallen off the wagon or whatever. You just need to find your motivation again. So that's what I'm going to go into in this podcast. And what I've done is I've basically created a little bit of a framework. So I like to come up with frameworks. I think it's really good for the brain to be able to see like a bit of a bridge from where you are, a bridge across the problem. Okay, so that's what this is about. So specifically what I'm talking about is I want you to be able to go from feeling guilty and feeling like you've let yourself down, like you're stuck in a rut, to be able to feel inspired and charged. And whenever we kind of get caught in a rut, there's a great saying which is, when you're in the picture, you can't see the frame. And sometimes when you're caught in a rut, you just can't see any way out of it. It's like you just feel so demoralised. And not only that, but you're like, I just can't be asked to get started again. Like I'm not getting pleasure in anything. And I'm eating food to try and steal a little bit of pleasure. And actually, whatever pleasure you get is only short-lived, and then you get on this cycle. I'm sure you know all about it. So in this podcast, I want to be able to get you from lethargic to energized. I want to be able to get you from perhaps binging, overeating some crap food to eating clean, and I want to be able for you to go from flat and demotivated to highly motivated. Okay, so that's what all this is about. Okay, so I want to start off with a little bit of an analogy, really, or a metaphor, whichever one it is. I don't know, but think back to when you was a kid, and I'm sure when you was on your bike, playing on your bike, and you learned to ride a bike. Sometimes you'd be flying down through the park, and you'd be loving it. It'd be brilliant. And then all of a sudden, you'd get your front wheel caught in a rut. Okay, and because you was going so fast, you couldn't break free of the rut, and you were just caught, and this rut was just like, it was steering, and eventually you just crashed. Okay, so I want you to remember that metaphor, because that's exactly what it's like with your food and fitness right now. The momentum of what you're doing, the momentum of the consequences of your actions are negative, and you're caught in this rut. You're walking toward you're moving towards this crash, whatever way it is. And you've got to think that, how do you get your front wheel out of this rut? Well, the first thing you do is you've got to start slowing down. And once you start slowing down, you can then start to get a little bit of control until eventually you stop, and then you get your front wheel out of the rut, and away you go. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about getting you to slow down, to halt some of this momentum so that you can adjust and then steer off and pedal off in the right direction. That's what it's about. And it's quite fitting, really, that I'm talking about this on this podcast, because, I got in a bit of a rut with this podcast, and I think we do it in lots of different aspects of our life. And, I certainly did it on this podcast, and, I've not done an episode now for months and months, and I kind of lost momentum with it. And then because I'd lost momentum with it, I'm like, well, where do I get started? And what do I do? And it sort of dragged on. I thought, do I need to reinvent it? Do I need to change it? And, spice it up a little bit and whatever. And that's what I've done. You might pick up that it's a new jingle, you might pick up that it's a slightly different format or whatever. But my aim is to get going with this. And that's one of the reasons why I picked up this question from Claire. I basically said, I posted in the Facebook group, you might have seen it, best topics for the Conquer Food podcast, go. And this is the first question that come in. So it's quite fitting. And it is just a reminder that it does happen in much more than just food and fitness and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so diving into the framework then. The framework that I've come up with in order to get started is the framework START, and each letter corresponds to a certain tip that I'm going to give you for getting going again. And before I do that, I just want to put it into context. So getting caught in a rut is just something that people that come to Team Bootcamp and come on the Conquer Food program experience so much. Just like you wouldn't believe. And at the minute, I'm putting together a 21-day program, like online coaching program, and which consists of 9 steps to take you from like binge eating and just completely overeating on fast and sugary foods to being completely food free. But not only that, like being incredibly motivated with your fitness and completely changing your life. And one of them steps, step number 6 is what I've called default divergence. It's about diverting your default settings. And if you're in a rut right now, I'm sure you'll see that your default setting has become pretty negative. And in order for you to change, that's got to change. So, I just want you to know that it's very, very common, this. So if you're listening to this and you're beating yourself up because you're like, you've let yourself down again and what have you, just remember that loads and loads of people experience this. Okay, so let's get into it. The S then from the start. The first one, size up the situation. What I mean by that is that by like its very nature, we have got to have periods where we're just not doing so well, if we've to have periods where we're doing really well. Okay, and what you usually find is that people do really, really well. They kickstart something new, they're cracking on, they're doing really well, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, maybe a couple of years, whatever, and then at some point their life gets in the way, there's a significant event, or they go on holiday or whatever, and they stop doing it. And this is when you start getting in a rut. And then obviously what happens then is we start this downward spiral where we're beating ourselves up with guilt. So the first thing that I want to say is that in sizing up the situation, like, what is the reality? And awareness is everything. And this first step is about creating a bit of awareness and just having a little think about what's actually going on. Because if it's perfectly normal for you to get in a rut, instead of beating ourselves up, do we just need to ease off a little bit and think, it's perfectly normal. I'm thinking about getting back on the wagon. So actually, it's not that I'm in the wrong place doing the wrong thing. I'm actually in the right place doing the right thing because I'm about to change it. And just that little flip of your mental sort of standpoint on this can start to alleviate some of the pressure and be enough just to get you going. Just understand that, and that there is a universal law, I can't remember what it's called, but in that, you are always at any one time in the right place doing the right thing. You can't not be, Someone might know the answer. I can't remember what it's called, but it's something like that. So in sizing up the situation, have you had... I suppose what you got to do is you got to look at it and go, right, okay, let's have a look at everything that's going on. I've got very little motivation. I'm eating loads of food. What is the reality here? And if you've had a couple of tough weeks or something has really, really kicked you in the nuts, just completely blindsided you, and, like a death of somebody, you've lost a pet, or you've been on holiday, or someone's got married, or you've moved house, or, stress at work, you're not sleeping very well, your work patterns have changed, whatever it is. Illness is another one. We've got to cut yourself a bit of slack there because, you have been cracking on and something has knocked you off that track. And that's perfectly normal. So in that respect, just back off a little bit. Maybe you just need... The reality is that there's a logical explanation for why you're feeling a bit shit. And if that's the case, then the logical thing to do then is just to maybe have a bit of a duvet day. And we talk a lot at Bootcamp about not just working out, but working in. And working in, I mean, these are things that you do where you're escaping forward, not escaping backwards. Like escaping backwards is like watching crap TV, eating fast food, sugary, foods, like comfort foods, and you're escaping, but it's got a negative connotation. Whereas escaping forward this is positive stuff, but you're still relaxing, you're still doing a little bit of self-love, maybe even just chilling out a little bit, having a bit of a deload week or whatever, and just by understanding, by looking at it, if you can explain it logically that, okay, of course I feel down, of course I feel like I've got no motivation, it's obvious why I've not been to the gym for a week, or all this kind of stuff, and if that's the case, give yourself a couple of days and then just know that, from here on in, you're just going to start chipping away at it. And that's what the rest of the steps are about. Now, if you look at it and you size up the situation and there is no logical answer, well, then it's time to give your head a bit of a wobble, okay? And it's time to remember some of the reasons why you got started in the first place, because human beings, we move away from pain and towards pleasure. Now, somewhere along that continuum, you've forgotten what the pain is and you've forgotten what the pleasure is that you're moving towards. So we need to size up the situation and remember all the reasons why we got started, and really sort of think about that. I've got another question on actually maintaining motivation, which is a bit of an oxymoron, because, motivation's what gets you going. So you can't keep getting started. You know what I mean? At some point you've got to go from getting started, which is motivation, to keeping going, which is determination. So I'm going to do a separate episode on that, but hopefully you'll get the idea there about the sizing up the situation. Is there a logical explanation as to what's going on right now? The next tip really comes from, I did a 14-day Rut Buster course a little while back, 14 days, where we all agreed that we was going to smash it out and get started. And we had this thing called a 2-minute rule, right? And quite often what we do is we set such high expectations of ourselves that we almost set ourselves up to fail. We want us to get back on the wagon exactly where we left it, but that's very rare. Is that gonna be possible? So what we did was we set tiny little goals that you could accomplish in 2 minutes. So for example, instead of going, right, okay, I'm going to get to the gym for an hour again today. Okay, that, when you look at it, there's only 24 of those hours in a day, and that can be quite hard if you've fallen off the wagon for a bit of time to get that back into your lifestyle. But 2 minutes is easy. 2 minutes is just a piece of piss. And if, I'm not saying you're going to go and smash out a training session in 2 minutes, but if you sort of think, look, what can I do in 2 minutes? Well, I can get my gym kit on. That's a great first step, because every time you put your gym kit on, it's a win. And at some point you're going to go, well, I've got my gym kit on now. I might as well do a few press-ups or a few squats or whatever, or go for a walk around the block. And if you're doing that for 2 minutes, at some point you're going to go, all right, well, I might as well, go around the block twice, or do a little jog, or aim for 5K or whatever. And I've found that it's much more motivating to start with really, really basic goals that are so easy to achieve that you can't help but succeed. So that's what the 2-minute rule is. Can you break down your goal into something that you can do in 2 minutes or less? And the real basic, real obvious things to do. The next one then, the A stands for aim for consistency. And we've got to remember that ultimately consistency is what brings us our results. It's not, I speak to a lot of people, or have done in the past, and sort of said, the only thing that gets me to lose weight is running. And that's rubbish. It just turns out that running is the only thing that they do consistently, or the gym is the only thing they do consistently. It's the consistent action which allows you to achieve your goals. It's not having the goal in itself. Okay, so when you start to aim for consistency, say you've got a calendar, and every day that you train, you put a little cross on the calendar, and if you aim for just 7 days, 10 days, whatever, you're going to start to see progress, and progress is the biggest motivating factor, bar none. When you start to see progress, you just want to keep going. You want to keep rolling on. So really, really focus on that, on consistent action. And the best thing to do is just go, right, well, it doesn't matter what I do, as long as I do something. Because when we talk about like the compounding effect of what you're doing, 1 day's training is 1 day's training. Does it have much of an effect? 1 day in 7? No. 2 days in 7, does it have much of an effect? Not really. 3 days out of 7, well, you're going to maintain the fitness that you've got. Okay, 4 days out of 7, now you're going to start to increase your fitness. 5 days out of 7, you then get exponential change in your body, and that's what we're after, is that big compounding effect. So that's the A. The R is just, it stands for remember it's normal to have down days. You know, it really is. I have down days. I don't know anybody that doesn't have a down day. I think the only person that I've ever heard of that doesn't have down days is bloody, what's he called? The swimmer, Michael Phelps. You know, he's trained every day since he was bloody 11 or something, 9-year-old or something like that. But even so, I'm sure he has days where he just doesn't want to get in the pool. You know, and you might argue that he's not normal. He's Olympian, a multi, you know, gold medalist, and that's elite. You know, we're just normal people, so you can expect that we're going to have times when we're kind of down. You know, so just back off yourself a little bit. Sometimes you really need to remember that. We can't have, you know, it's that quote in it. You know, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. There's got to be. So, you know, remember that it's perfectly normal to have ups and downs, and that's just the way it is. The key thing is that we all have this band of tolerance where, you know, before perhaps our weight was way off the scale, way more than we want it to be. When you start to get a grip of your weight, your band of tolerance becomes so much less. And it means that, you know, you might go up 3 or 4 pounds or 10 pounds or 12, you know, maybe even a stone, but then you'll come back down to your average, and then you might lose, you know, up to a stone, and you just kind of teeter around the same point, and that's normal for your weight to fluctuate. Weight in particular, because, you know, it just fluctuates for so many different relations and for reasons. And weight is not always a great indication of how you're getting on, but it's what we tend to focus on because we can get on a scale and we can see it and you get instant feedback, and that's that. But our fitness can fluctuate as well, you know, and it should do. You can't stay in peak physical performance all the time. Otherwise, you'll just run the risk of injury. And you can't train 100%, you know, flat out effort because, again, you're running the risk of injury. So it's perfectly normal to have these peaks and troughs and peaks and troughs. And just by recognizing it, you'll know that, you're aware enough to then do something about it. And the key is to work on bringing that bracket narrower, that bracket of tolerance narrower and narrower and narrower, until eventually you will only tolerate sort of going 4 or 5 pounds over, 4 or 5 pounds under, or whatever, you know, whatever it is. And, you know, really bringing that bracket down. Okay, and then the normal one then is to take immediate action. I know, you know, when you're caught in a rut, you kind of like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. But the truth is, you're soon going to run out of tomorrows, you know. I've been a bit like this with my run that I've got coming up in Kenya, where it's like, okay, oh yeah, I'll do a long run tomorrow. I'll do a long run tomorrow. And now I'm 2 weeks out, and I've got 7 tomorrows left. And then I need to start tapering. I need to start doing some heat training, and I can't do any long runs. And I've put it off, and that's kind of what we get into. So, you know, we need to take some form of action now, whatever it is, remembering that once we start to see a little bit of progress, in whatever shape or form, you know, whatever way we're going to monitor it, maybe it's just how we feel, maybe it's something that we can actually quantify, whether it's, you know, whatever it is. But once we start to see progress, we need to be reassured by the fact that motivation will help us kick on. And, you know, as much as we're in a bit of a trough now, if we keep going and keep working at it and aim for consistency, we can get on a high. Okay, so that's that. That's my little start. 5 things that I would do to concentrate on to get back on track, to get back on the wagon, and you know, not in a little bit of an order, but, you know, pretty just sort of raw and thrown out there. What can you do to help with this? Another thing that you can do is you can work through the food facts, food training that I do. You can go to Conquer Foodies. which is Conquer Food IES, foodies.com. And there you will find the Food Facts course, which you can sign up for free and just work through those 9 big hitting tips in regards to your food. Okay, get back into it, submerge yourself into being positive and reminding yourself of those food facts. And also look out for the 14-day Rut Buster training. Okay, because something that is incredibly motivating as well is having other people around you that are either slightly ahead or on the same track as you. And in the Facebook group, there's a whole group of people that are in the same same state as you. They're all kind of, well, not all of them, but some of them are kind of just letting it slide a little bit and need to get it back on track. So definitely look for a little bit of accountability and a partner to work through. I talk often about doing your daily declarations in the group. A public declaration is incredibly motivating, much more so than sort of keeping it to yourself. If you get in the morning, get in the Facebook group and go, right, my daily declaration today is I'm going to do a 500-meter walk, okay, or a 5K run, or whatever it is, you're much more likely to see through on that, to see it through. So there you go. I'm pretty sure that'll be a benefit for you. Just the fact that you are listening to this right now means that you are, you're starting to chip away at it. You're starting to get serious at it. If you've got comments or, you've got some tips of your own, then get in the Facebook group and comment them. And if you think other people may benefit from this episode, then send it to them and encourage them to join the Conquer Food community and to be part of this, because as I always say, there's a lot of people out there really, really struggling, and we've got a group that is incredibly motivated and doing really, really well. And I hate the thought of people struggling, and there's no need to. So share it, get them in the community, and until the next episode, take care. And thank you, podcasters, for joining us again on the Conquer Food Show. Hopefully you picked up some great nuggets of information there. Make sure you join us next week for another episode. And if you've enjoyed this, please like, share, and give us a little review on iTunes. It all helps. Take care.